Your voice is one of the few weapons that reveals your inner world before you ever explain yourself. Long before people judge your ideas, they judge the certainty behind your words. A hesitant sentence creates doubt. A rushed explanation weakens authority. A scattered thought tells the world that your mind is scattered as well. Most people spend years trying to become more successful, more respected, and more influential, while ignoring the one skill that silently controls all three, the ability to speak with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Every conversation is a battlefield where perception is formed, and those who master communication often win before the real contest even begins. Look closely at the people who naturally command attention. They are not always the smartest in the room. They are not always the most talented or the most experienced. What separates them is their ability to organize their thoughts, control their emotions, and deliver their words with precision. Their confidence is not magic. It is the result of understanding that every pause, every sentence, every choice of words shapes how others see them. They speak slowly because they are not chasing approval. They speak clearly because they know confusion destroys credibility. And they speak with conviction because they have learned to trust their own voice before asking others to trust it. The tragedy is that most people silence themselves long before anyone else does. They overthink every sentence, apologize for every opinion, and fear making mistakes so much that they never express what truly matters. They confuse speaking more with communicating better. They believe confidence appears overnight, when in reality it is built through discipline, awareness, and deliberate practice. Every unclear sentence is often a reflection of an unclear mind, and every powerful speaker begins by mastering their thoughts before mastering their words. In this speech, you will discover why articulate people seem effortlessly persuasive, how confidence is built from habits rather than personality, and the subtle psychological shifts that make others listen when you speak. You will learn how to remove the hidden behaviors that weaken your presence, replace uncertainty with calm authority, and develop a voice that carries weight in every room you enter. Because the goal is not simply to become a better speaker, it is to become someone whose words are impossible to ignore. The first obstacle to becoming articulate is not a limited vocabulary, poor grammar, or a lack of public speaking experience. It is a mind that has never learned to organize itself. Speech is simply thought made visible. When your thoughts are scattered, your words become scattered. When your emotions are unstable, your sentences begin to wander. Most people try to fix the surface by memorizing clever phrases, improving pronunciation, or copying the speaking style of someone they admire. Yet these changes rarely last because they never address the real source of the problem. The quality of your speech will always mirror the quality of your thinking. Before you attempt to impress anyone with what comes out of your mouth, you must understand what is happening inside your mind. Observe people who struggle to express themselves. They often begin a sentence with confidence, only to interrupt themselves halfway through. They add unnecessary explanations because they fear being misunderstood. They fill silence with meaningless words because silence makes them uncomfortable. Their mind races faster than their mouth can keep up, creating confusion both for themselves and for the person listening. This pattern is rarely caused by a lack of intelligence. In many cases, highly intelligent people communicate poorly because they have trained themselves to think in endless loops rather than clear conclusions. Intelligence without clarity creates complexity. Clarity transforms intelligence into influence. The disciplined mind follows a different path. Before speaking, it pauses. It identifies the central idea. It removes everything that does not serve that idea. It understands that every unnecessary sentence weakens the message. Powerful communicators do not overwhelm people with information. They guide attention with precision. They know that every conversation has a destination, and every sentence either moves toward it or away from it. This is why their words appear effortless. The effort happened long before they opened their mouths. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they must think faster in order to sound smarter. In reality, speed often reveals insecurity rather than intelligence. The mind that constantly rushes rarely produces its best thoughts. It jumps from one idea to another without allowing any of them to fully develop. Confidence does not require rapid responses, it requires accurate responses. The person who takes a brief moment to gather their thoughts often appears far more capable than the ones who answers immediately with scattered ideas. Silence used with purpose is never a weakness. It signals that your mind values precision over performance. Your inner dialogue shapes every conversation you have with the outside world. If your private thoughts are filled with self-criticism, hesitation, and fear of judgment, those emotions will eventually appear in your speech. You may attempt to hide them, but your tone, pace, and body language will reveal them. The voice becomes tense. The sentences become uncertain. Questions begin to sound like apologies. This is why becoming articulate is not merely a communication skill. It is an exercise in mastering the relationship you have with your own mind. Most people spend hours consuming information but very little time processing it. They move from one video to another, one article to another, one conversation to another, believing that knowledge alone creates wisdom. It does not. A crowded mind cannot produce clear speech. It becomes filled with borrowed opinions, conflicting ideas, and endless distractions. When asked a simple question, the mind searches through this chaos, trying to locate an answer. The result is hesitation. The more disciplined approach is to regularly simplify your thinking. Ask yourself what you truly believe, why you believe it, and whether you can explain it in a single sentence. If you cannot explain something simply, your understanding is probably incomplete. Articulate individuals often appear calm because they have reduced internal noise. They are not fighting dozens of competing thoughts while trying to speak. Their attention remains fixed on one message at a time. This focus creates confidence because confidence grows from certainty. The clearer you become about your own ideas, the less you fear disagreement. You no longer speak to seek approval. You speak to express understanding. This subtle shift changes everything. Instead of reacting emotionally to every response, you remain anchored in your own reasoning. Another hidden advantage of mastering your mind is emotional control. Words become dangerous when emotions are allowed to lead them. Anger speeds up the tongue while slowing down judgment. Fear convinces you to remain silent when speaking would benefit you. Excitement encourages exaggeration. Anxiety creates over-explanation. Every emotional state influences language in predictable ways. The disciplined speaker recognizes these emotional currents before they take control. Rather than suppressing emotion, they observe it. They notice frustration without allowing it to dictate their next sentence. They recognize nervousness without surrendering to it. This awareness creates space between feeling and speaking, and within that space lies true self-control. Many conversations fail because people listen only long enough to prepare their next response. Their mind remains occupied with defending itself instead of understanding the other person. As a result, their replies feel disconnected. They miss opportunities to ask meaningful questions because they are too busy protecting their own image. Genuine articulation requires deep listening. A focused mind absorbs information before attempting to contribute. It notices patterns, emotions, and hidden intentions. This deeper understanding allows responses to become more relevant, more thoughtful, and far more persuasive. The ability to organize thoughts also depends on discipline outside of conversation. Reading carefully, writing regularly, reflecting on experiences, and spending time in deliberate silence all strengthen the mind's ability to think clearly. Writing forces vague ideas to become specific. Reflection separates important lessons from temporary emotions. Silence allows scattered thoughts to settle. These habits may seem unrelated to speaking, yet they quietly build the foundation upon which articulate communication is formed. Notice how the strongest leaders rarely speak without intention. They are comfortable leaving certain thoughts unsaid because they understand that restraint often increases impact. An undisciplined mind believes every thought deserves immediate expression. A disciplined mind knows that selective speech creates authority. Every unnecessary opinion reduces the value of the necessary ones. Every impulsive comment weakens the power of carefully chosen words. Speaking less but saying more is not achieved by learning communication techniques alone. It begins with learning which thoughts deserve attention and which deserve silence. Your environment also shapes the quality of your thinking. Constant distraction fragments attention. Endless notifications train the mind to abandon one thought before completing it. This habit eventually appears in conversation. Sentences become interrupted. Ideas remain unfinished. Attention drifts. If you wish to become more articulate, protect your ability to think deeply. Create moments where your mind can focus on one subject without interruption. Depth of thought naturally produces depth of speech. Confidence grows each time your actions confirm your beliefs. When you consistently think clearly, make deliberate decisions, and express yourself honestly, your mind begins to trust itself. That trust becomes visible in your voice. You stop searching for perfect words because you understand the message beneath them. You stop fearing small mistakes because your confidence no longer depends on flawless performance. Your speech becomes grounded in conviction rather than appearance. People often assume that articulate speakers possess a natural gift that others simply lack. In reality, what appears as talent is frequently the visible result of invisible habits. They have trained themselves to think before reacting, to simplify before explaining, to listen before answering, and to understand before persuading. Their words carry weight because they originate from a mind that has learned order instead of chaos, patience instead of urgency, intention instead of impulse, certainty instead of confusion, and discipline instead of noise. Confidence in speech is often misunderstood. Most people imagine it as loudness, bold gestures, quick responses, or an overpowering personality. They assume the most confident person in the room is the one who speaks the most, interrupts the most, or dominates every conversation. But true confidence is rarely noisy. It is measured, it is patient. It has no urgent need to prove itself because it already understands its own value. The strongest communicators do not rush to fill silence, nor do they constantly seek reassurance that their words are being accepted. They speak because they have something worth saying, not because they fear disappearing from the conversation. The desire for approval quietly destroys confidence long before anyone notices it. It begins with small habits. You soften every opinion by saying, "I could be wrong." You apologize before expressing an idea. You constantly search people's faces for signs of agreement while speaking. If someone disagrees, your confidence immediately weakens because it was built on acceptance instead of conviction. This creates a dangerous cycle. The more approval you seek, the more uncertain your speech becomes. The more uncertain your speech becomes, the less convincing your words appear. People naturally trust individuals who trust themselves. Approval is one of the most addictive rewards the human mind can chase. From childhood, many people are conditioned to avoid conflict, satisfy expectations, and say whatever earns praise. While this behavior may create temporary comfort, it slowly trains the mind to depend on external validation. Eventually, every conversation becomes a performance instead of an honest exchange of ideas. Instead of asking, "Is what I'm saying true?" the mind begins asking, "Will people like what I'm saying?" That single shift changes everything. Truth becomes secondary. Authenticity is sacrificed for acceptance. Confidence disappears because it can never survive while depending on the opinions of strangers. Deliberate confidence begins with accepting that disagreement is not rejection. Every meaningful idea challenges someone's existing beliefs. Every strong opinion creates resistance somewhere. If your goal is universal approval, you will eventually stop saying anything important. Your language becomes vague because vagueness rarely offends. You avoid specifics because specifics invite criticism. You hide behind endless qualifications so no one can accuse you of certainty. Yet certainty is exactly what gives speech its power. Not certainty that you are always correct, but certainty that your perspective deserves to be expressed honestly. One of the clearest signs of quiet confidence is controlled pacing. Nervous speakers often rush because they unconsciously want to escape the discomfort of being observed. They speak quickly, believing speed will hide uncertainty. Ironically, it accomplishes the opposite. Rapid speech communicates anxiety. It suggests that your thoughts are trying to outrun your fear. Confident speakers understand something different. They know the listener will follow their pace. If they slow down, the conversation slows down. If they remain calm, they influence the emotional atmosphere around them. Speaking deliberately creates the impression that every sentence has been chosen carefully. The pause is one of the most misunderstood tools in communication. Many people fear silence because they assume it signals weakness or forgetfulness. They rush to fill every empty moment with unnecessary words, repeating themselves or adding explanations that weaken their original message. Yet silence often increases authority. A thoughtful pause communicates that your words deserve attention. It allows your ideas to settle in the listener's mind. It also gives you time to organize your next sentence rather than reacting impulsively. Confidence is not measured by how quickly you answer, but by how comfortably you can think before answering. Another habit that weakens confidence is excessive explanation. When people doubt themselves, they often believe more words will make them sound more convincing. Instead, they bury their strongest ideas beneath layers of unnecessary detail. They defend statements that were never challenged. They repeat points that were already understood. This behavior reveals insecurity rather than expertise. Truly confident communicators trust that one clear sentence often carries more influence than 10 complicated ones. They understand that repetition without purpose reduces impact instead of increasing it. Body language and speech cannot be separated because they are both expressions of the same internal state. A tense posture produces a tense voice. Restless movements interrupt mental focus. Constant fidgeting communicates uncertainty before a single word is spoken. Deliberate confidence begins long before language. It begins with stillness. Remaining physically composed sends a signal to your own nervous system that there is no immediate danger. As your body relaxes, your breathing becomes deeper. As your breathing becomes deeper, your voice naturally gains stability and strength. Many people assume they need to eliminate nervousness before speaking confidently. This belief creates endless frustration because nervousness is a normal human response. Experienced speakers still experience moments of tension. The difference is that they no longer interpret those feelings as weakness. They recognize nervousness as energy rather than evidence of failure. Instead of resisting it, they direct it. They focus their attention on the message instead of themselves. This shift transforms anxiety into presence. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act clearly despite feeling it. The approval seeker constantly edits themselves while speaking. Every sentence is filtered through imagined criticism. Will they laugh at this? Will they disagree? Will they think I'm unintelligent? These invisible questions consume mental energy that should be focused on communication. As a result, speech becomes fragmented. Confidence disappears because attention is divided. The deliberate speaker removes this distraction by accepting that complete control over other people's opinions is impossible. Once this truth is understood, attention returns to the only thing that can be controlled, the clarity and honesty of the message. People with quiet authority rarely argue over every disagreement. They understand that endless debate often becomes an emotional contest rather than a search for truth. Instead of reacting defensively, they ask questions, they remain curious, they allow others to speak without feeling threatened. This ability comes from inner security. When your identity is not attached to winning every conversation, you become free to communicate with patience rather than ego. Ironically, this restraint often makes others more willing to consider your perspective. Deliberate confidence also requires accepting imperfection. Many people remain silent because they believe every sentence must be flawless. They fear stumbling over a word or forgetting a point. This pursuit of perfection creates paralysis. Great communicators understand that authenticity is often more persuasive than perfection. A small mistake rarely damages credibility. Obvious insecurity does. Listeners are remarkably forgiving of human imperfections when the speaker communicates with sincerity and composure. Your voice reflects your relationship with yourself. If you constantly question your worth, your speech will carry hesitation. If you respect your own thoughts, your words naturally become steadier. This does not mean believing you are superior to others. It means recognizing that your experiences, observations, and ideas deserve expression without constant apology. Self-respect becomes audible. It appears in your tone, your pacing, your posture, and your willingness to finish a sentence without immediately seeking confirmation. Every conversation offers a choice between performance and presence. Performance focuses on appearing impressive. Presence focuses on communicating effectively. Performance creates tension because it depends on outcomes you cannot control. Presence creates confidence because it depends only on your willingness to speak with intention. The person chasing approval constantly adjusts themselves to fit every audience. The person grounded in deliberate confidence remains consistent regardless of who is listening. There is immense strength in speaking only when necessary and saying exactly what you mean. The world often mistakes volume for authority and speed for intelligence, but neither creates lasting influence. Influence grows from consistency, composure, and clarity. When you remove the need to impress, your words become simpler. When your words become simpler, they become stronger. When they become stronger, people stop paying attention to how loudly you speak and begin paying attention to what you actually say. Your confidence no longer depends on applause, agreement, or admiration. It is sustained by the quiet certainty that your voice belongs in the conversation, your thoughts deserve space, your message has purpose, and your presence never requires permission from anyone else. Words are never judged only by their meaning. They are judged by their weight. Some people speak for several minutes and leave no lasting impression because every sentence feels ordinary, predictable, or unnecessary. Others speak only a few sentences, yet those words remain in people's minds long after the conversation ends. The difference is not vocabulary or intelligence, it is intention. Every powerful communicator understands that words lose value when they are used carelessly. If everything you say carries equal importance, then nothing stands out. To become truly articulate, you must learn to make every word earn its place. Most conversations are filled with verbal clutter. People repeat themselves, wander into unrelated stories, add unnecessary details, and explain ideas that were already understood. They confuse quantity with quality, believing that speaking more makes them appear more knowledgeable. In reality, excessive words often reveal uncertainty. The more you rely on endless explanations, the more you communicate that you do not fully trust the strength of your original point. Clear thinkers understand that powerful communication is often an act of subtraction. They remove everything that distracts from the central message until only the essential remains. Imagine listening to two different speakers. The first one fills every silence with filler words, changes direction repeatedly, and struggles to arrive at a conclusion. The second one speaks more slowly, chooses each sentence carefully, and never wastes your attention. Even before you analyze the content, you instinctively trust the second speaker more. Human beings naturally associate clarity with competence. When someone consistently expresses ideas in a structured and deliberate way, the mind assumes that the thinking behind those ideas is equally organized. One of the simplest ways to make your words carry weight is to stop speaking before you know what you want to say. Many people begin talking while they are still trying to figure out their own thoughts. Their sentences become confusing because they are thinking and speaking at the same time. Powerful communicators reverse the process. They allow the idea to become clear internally before expressing it externally. This brief moment of preparation often transforms a scattered explanation into a memorable statement. Another overlooked principle is structure. Every meaningful message has a beginning that captures attention, a middle that develops the idea, and an ending that leaves clarity. Without structure, even brilliant ideas become difficult to follow. The listener becomes lost because the speaker has never decided where the conversation is going. Articulate people instinctively organize their thoughts. They introduce the central idea first, support it with relevant examples, and conclude without unnecessary repetition. This pattern makes their communication feel effortless because the listener never has to struggle to understand the direction of the conversation. The strongest words are often the simplest ones. Complexity impresses very few people for very long. Simplicity, on the other hand, creates understanding. Many individuals deliberately use complicated language because they believe it makes them appear intelligent. Instead, it often creates distance. The listener becomes focused on decoding the language rather than absorbing the message. Great communicators understand that their responsibility is not to display their vocabulary, but to transfer understanding. If a simple sentence communicates the truth more effectively than a complicated paragraph, the simple sentence always wins. Precision also matters. General statements disappear because they lack shape. Specific language creates images in the listener's mind. Compare someone saying you need to improve with someone saying you need to slow down, organize your thoughts, and finish one idea before beginning another. The second statement immediately becomes more memorable because it gives the mind something concrete to hold on to. Precision transforms abstract advice into practical understanding. Silence is another element that gives words their weight. Music without pauses becomes noise. Conversation without pauses becomes exhausting. Many people fear silence because they assume listeners will lose interest. The opposite is often true. A brief pause before an important statement creates anticipation. A pause after an important statement allows it to settle. Silence gives language rhythm. It creates contrast. Without contrast, every sentence blends together until nothing feels significant. Another mistake people make is speaking emotionally before they have fully understood their emotions. Strong feelings naturally demand expression, but immediate expression is not always effective expression. Anger, frustration, excitement, and fear often distort language. They encourage exaggeration. They invite impulsive statements that cannot be taken back. The disciplined communicator learns to separate emotional intensity from verbal precision. Instead of speaking at the height of emotion, they allow clarity to return first. Their words become stronger because they are chosen rather than released impulsively. Questions are often more powerful than declarations. Many people believe influence comes from constantly providing answers. Yet the right question can reshape someone's thinking more effectively than a long explanation. A thoughtful question invites reflection. It encourages participation instead of resistance. Rather than forcing ideas onto someone else, it allows them to discover those ideas themselves. This subtle shift increases persuasion because people naturally trust conclusions they arrive at through their own thinking. Stories also give words greater impact because they connect information with emotion. Facts may be remembered for a short time, but experiences remain in memory much longer. This is why skilled communicators often illustrate ideas through simple examples instead of abstract theories. A well-chosen story creates emotional involvement. It allows listeners to imagine themselves within the situation. Once imagination becomes engaged, understanding deepens. Another characteristic of meaningful speech is consistency. Every sentence should reinforce the same central message. Weak communicators frequently contradict themselves without realizing it. They begin confidently, then immediately weaken their statement with unnecessary doubt. They make a point, then apologize for making it. They express conviction, then retreat because they fear disagreement. This inconsistency reduces credibility. Strong communicators remain aligned. Their tone, language, and reasoning all support the same direction. The desire to appear interesting often causes people to say far more than necessary. They interrupt with unrelated experiences, chase every new thought, and compete for attention rather than earning it. Ironically, restraint creates greater curiosity. When someone speaks only after thinking, listeners naturally assume those words matter. Scarcity increases value. Constant talking reduces it. This principle applies not only in public speaking, but in every conversation throughout life. Listening also determines the weight of your words. If you ignore what others are saying, your responses become disconnected from reality. Effective communication is not a performance delivered to an audience. It is a relationship between minds. By listening carefully, you understand what actually needs to be said rather than what you merely wanted to say. This awareness prevents unnecessary arguments, reduces misunderstanding, and makes every response feel relevant. Confidence, clarity, and influence all depend on intentional language. Every sentence should move the conversation forward. Every example should strengthen the central idea. Every pause should create emphasis rather than uncertainty. Every word should serve a purpose. When language becomes intentional, communication becomes memorable. People often remember less than 10% of what they hear, yet they remember how someone made them think and feel. This is why meaningful speech is never about displaying knowledge alone. It is about creating understanding. It is about respecting the listener's attention enough to avoid wasting it. Every unnecessary sentence asks people to carry extra weight that contributes nothing. Every precise sentence rewards their attention with clarity. The goal is not to become someone who speaks constantly. The goal is to become someone whose words matter because they are chosen carefully, delivered deliberately, supported by clear thinking, strengthened through purposeful silence, refined by disciplined listening, guided by structure, focused on meaning instead of performance, and remembered because every sentence contributes something valuable that could not have been expressed more clearly in any other way.